dollars. If you guys know who that is, tell him I'm his cousin. Because I want to share that. Like, he should be partying with us. 1.1 million bucks last night. So, who am I? Juan Carlos Reyes was born in El Salvador. El Salvador has a long history of war, long history of gang violence. El Salvador in 2016 was deemed the murder capital of the world. So I immigrated to Canada after we got a rock through our window that said, live today or die tomorrow. So we said, you know what, this is getting a little bit too serious, so we got the hell out of the country. Grew up in Canada. The past speaker, Joe Muskokeman, I know him for many years, from Chippewa of the Thames. And given the cultural differences between a term that I coined myself that it's controversial, my European Canadian friends and American people. American people are brown skin. We come from all the way from Canada to Argentina, and we all look the same. That's why brown people here, when they go to Mexico, they're like, hey, ¿qué pasó? Because we look like American. That's what the people in America look like. So people in Asia have a very unique look. So American people look very similar to what I look like. And growing up in London, Ontario, most of my friends were from the reserve nearby, either Chippewa or Oneida, or how they like to call themselves somewhere mixed, they're potato chips, because it's Potawatomi, Oneida, or Chippewa, which turns out to be potato chips. Anyways, growing up in that area, I got to experience reserve life. I've studied mining engineering at Laurentian University. Got a long educational profile because turns out that I have a photographic memory, so school was very easy for me. So I stayed in school for a long time. So I have a mining engineering degree, physics and math degree, computer science degree, a master's from Harvard University in economics, and started doing a PhD in Russia. I speak many languages and enjoy traveling the world. But during the time that I was growing up, I grew up in London, but then moved to Sudbury. And again, most of my friends were from the nearby reserve. And I got introduced and got involved with First Nations economic development at an early age. I think I started volunteering with Wabatech when I was 18 years old. A person that you guys might all know is Don Madavi. So I know Don Madavi since, I only claim to be 35, so since 18 years old to 35, do the math. But anyways, getting to see the life and the reality on First Nations and the struggle within the communities, it's a reality that not many people outside of the reserves can truly understand or see. And the barriers that exist, I mean, we've been talking about how funding doesn't come through, or Joe Muskokeman was saying, or Bill Moran, the minister, was saying that, you know, it's by law they only have to give you this for that. The rest is at the leisure of government. And based on the Indian Act, when something has been working, they pull the rug, and then it disappears. And this is not just saying that that's a theory. I mean, the reason why First Nations elections were mandated by the Indian Act every 2 years is to make sure that there wasn't an operational government. And this is discussions that with the last guy in the video, Joe Muskokeman and Delbert Riley, past national chief, have had for many years, how the colonialism still exists. So when I was asked by Shannon to come share some comments about what we've done in El Salvador, last week I was in Bolivia. The week before I was in Argentina. I leave from here to go to Peru to share what we've done in El Salvador. I think it was very fitting to explain to you guys the reality of El Salvador and how it actually fits to the realities of First Nations. Because we're a colonized nation. In El Salvador, we had it was worse than colonized because there was violent war that was funded by the US government, and then after the war was over, they sent organized crime which was the gang members, which in El Salvador, and I mean, this is just from historical evidence, because I didn't live there during this time, I lived here in Canada, but in 2016, El Salvador was the most violent country in the world. It was deemed the murder capital on the world. In 103 homicides for every 100,000 people. It was the most horrible country you can imagine. So what I wanted to do the parallel is how El Salvador, how a leader, the president, the current president of El Salvador, his name is Nayib Bukele, how a leader can change a country from being broken, dangerous, and literally non-existent, till today we are the first largest growth in tourism globally. We're the safest country in the world by statistics, safer than Switzerland. We're now the home for digital assets, which is a topic, I mean, this is technically what I'm supposed to be speaking, but if I start the conversation, I'm going to confuse you more. So I will touch some parts of the conversation because it's important to understand where this is going. But we have created clarity in this industry, a clarity now that has brought us to be the hub of digital assets. So how do we get here? We got here by somebody stepping up and saying, you know what, enough is enough. Let's get out of the thumb of colonization. You know, similar to what happens here, that government at any point can get rid of the funding, can change the funding, can change the rules. Well, our governments for the past 30 years in El Salvador, many of them were corrupted. In fact, the past president stole $300 million, went to the country next door, they gave him a citizenship, I don't know how much you paid them, and we can't extradite him to put him in jail, because now we're a law-abiding and super law enforcement country. So that's the type of corruption that existed in our country. In 2019, a young guy named Nayib Bukele said, you know what, enough is enough. And then he started by cleaning up the old politics, cleaning up the old guards that the corrupt people had. Now, I'm sharing a narrative. I'm not saying this is what you got to do in your research. I'm just telling you what happened in El Salvador, so don't be trying to burn me alive afterwards. But this is what worked for us. At one point, he had to come in with the army and remove the Attorney General and the Supreme Court forcibly because they were all corrupted. He brought everyone in cabinet to the table, asked the Attorney General, investigate every single one of them, and whoever's taking a bribe, whoever has illegal money that's not declared, put them in jail. So the number one thing that the president did is create clear rules on how to operate a country transparently. Today, he actually did that to, I'm part of cabinet, I'm part of a regulator, presidential commissioner, so I'm part of the cabinet of the government, and he brought us all in, and once again, he told the Attorney General, investigate everyone, because he doesn't want to have any thieves around his table. So we're all clear that we run a transparent system in El Salvador. So this vision has been able to turn this country from the murder capital of the world now to the safest nation in America, and is statistically safer than Switzerland. We literally have, I mean, I have videos that I posted. I live close to the beach and I go surfing. I leave my phone, my wallet with a lot of money in it, sitting on top of a towel. I go out surfing, my phone is taping, and nobody touches it. Because the criminals and the people that cause trouble are usually the same people. And then this is the same thing in the communities. I know many communities that you know exactly who it is that's the bad person that sells drugs, that does all these things, but no one ever does anything about it. So in El Salvador, the president did. He jailed, in our case, and I mean this sounds horrendous, but we jailed about 70,000 people. Now, these weren't just random jailings. These were people. You gotta remember that in El Salvador, to be the murder capital of the world, people that live there, you had to pay to stay alive. You had to pay a rent. So it was a gang member that would collect money for you and your family to stay alive. And if you didn't pay it, then they'll shoot your kid or they'll shoot a nephew or somebody, right? So it came from that to now what's arguably the safest country in the world. And then in 2021, this is the reason I came back to El Salvador, was the adoption of Bitcoin. How many people here know what Bitcoin is? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, how many people not just heard of Bitcoin, but actually know what Bitcoin is? Can I see a show of hands? Oh, wow. It's fantastic. So for those of you that don't know what Bitcoin is truly sovereignty. Bitcoin is the reinvention of the ancient payment system, the transfer of value that we have that depends on a central bank. Today, 2018 was the last collapse of the banks, that they got a little bit too greedy and spent the money, and there was no money, and the governments needed to bail out the banks with their tax dollars. This system has existed for over 500 years, started by a private group of people, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, that created the first central bank. And it's a way that the financial industry has worked for 500 years. The problem is that most people believe that when you put your money in the bank is just putting it away for you. The bank's using your money and invest in it to make more money. Your bank doesn't really have your money. That's why some of you that needed like $10,000, the bank will tell you, you have to call us. We don't have that type of money, because they don't. They spent it all and they're trying to make more money with your money. So we in El Salvador in 2001, because of the misappropriation of funds, corrupted politicians, etc., the currency collapsed and we became dollarized. So we were dependent of the US dollar. So in El Salvador, our currency is the US dollar. What happens with the US dollar is that if you don't dance to the tune that the United States wants, at any point they can say, well, I'm not gonna send you any more dollars. And guess what? Your economy collapses. This is the reason why in 2021, Bitcoin was adopted, because it is sovereign money. It is true money that has value, that can't be censored, that can't be technically stolen, because it's powered by the blockchain. It's got traceability, it's got transparency. So Bitcoin was adopted as an option to the US dollar to start creating their own sovereign fund. Now, this precedent also, one thing about Bitcoin, and this is, perhaps, I mean, I could easily talk about an hour about Bitcoin, because as you can tell, I'm a Bitcoiner. But one thing that you need to understand about Bitcoin is that most of the things that we're used to, like the car, for example, the car is just a reinvention. You have the horse and carriage, the car is just an advancement of the horse and carriage. It's got the horse in the front, which is the motor, and the carriage at the back, which is part of the car, right? It is not a reinvention. It is exactly the same, just an upgrade of an old technology. What we did with Bitcoin is created a new system to transfer value and 100% removing the middle person. The way Bitcoin works, it's got an open ledger book, so it's got an open accounting book that's transparent, visible by everyone, traceable, and immutable, which means that once a transaction is recorded in the Bitcoin network, it can never be changed. So instead of depending on the bank to say, yes, that person has the funds, or no, that person doesn't have the funds, we depend on this ledger book, on this accounting book that we can all see. So whenever you receive a Bitcoin transaction, you can go into this accounting book that's open to everyone and actually see that the money did move from this wallet to the other wallet. So there's no way that, unless you don't want to check, there's no way to cheat any transaction. It's immutable, it can't be stopped, there is no one that controls Bitcoin. So that's the great advantage of Bitcoin. And that's what we adopted in the country, because we wanted to begin getting under the thumb of colonialism and having control over money by another country is a big part of that. Now, one of the things that allowed us in this sector, and one of the great things that this president has done is that he has a vision, he has an idea, and the other thing that he does is he goes and looks for who is the world's best and most talented person in this industry and brings him to the country, and that's why we succeed. The need of a champion. I was happily retired. I started technology companies, did fairly well, bought a private island in Nicaragua, lived super happily, super fun life. But then the president adopted Bitcoin, and every time I would come to Canada for family dinners and stuff, the family would be, isn't this that crap you always talk to us about, like to buy this Bitcoin stuff? I'm like, yeah, we'll go back to your country and help. I'm like, well, my country's Canada. So anyways, I decided to go back to El Salvador, had a meeting with government, had a discussion with them, told them I'm Canadian, I'm very strict, gotta be by the rules, gotta have structure, can't just jump in and do something. And we discussed about where this technology was going. And this is the important part, and this is perhaps the greatest opportunity right now for First Nations, is this technology will eventually power all the financial transactions in the world. And not knowing or not stepping up onto this technology, it'd be like in the 90s, listening to a conversation about the internet and you're like, yeah, I don't think that's ever gonna take off. It is that big. So the early adopters, such as El Salvador, such as many of the First Nation communities here, can adopt, start implementing, and start creating rules and starting to understand what this technology means for sovereignty and the growth of their economy. It's very important. Now, as I said, I'm gonna try to just talk in general terms because it can get confusing without explaining the overall idea, without clarifying a lot of stuff. So, a lot of the problem with this industry globally is that there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of things. So, for me, the word crypto, I don't really use it. For me, crypto is noise. Crypto, Pepe coin, and all this other garbage out there, those are speculative products that belong in a casino. And if you want to play in the casino, there's one next door, go ahead. But for us, we focus on something that has real world asset backing, something that can be regulated and supervised by a financial regulator. And this is the clear vision that we had in El Salvador. So in 2023, we passed a law called the Law of Digital Asset Emissions, which is going to be a word and a subject within the next 6 months to a year that you're going to be hearing a lot about. It's called tokenization of real world assets. So El Salvador, since 2021, became the first country that legalized a digital asset, Bitcoin, as legal currency. Because of that legalization, we had to understand, what the hell is this? And Bitcoin and digital assets sounds like a financial instrument. Therefore, globally, best example I can tell you, if you buy an electric car tomorrow, to you, it's just a car. It's got a key, it's got 4 wheels. The only difference is now you don't put gasoline in it, you plug it in. So that to the consumer, an electric car is a car. But what happens if you take that car to your mechanic? Your regular mechanic is gonna have a heart attack because an electric car is a computer programmed to behave like a car. But everything in an electric car is sensors, it's computer chips, it's electric motors, it's batteries, it's a computer. And it's not a car anymore. That's exactly the greatest problem that we have and the largest opportunity that exists within this industry. That
because digital assets like Bitcoin, they look like traditional financial instruments, we expect the traditional mechanic of the traditional financial industry, which is central banks, the superintendents, we expect them to be able to regulate and supervise these instruments. But it's exactly the same thing in an electric car. You need an electric car mechanic in order to be able to service an electric car. We have not had that in the digital assets industry yet. The only country that has seen this clarity was El Salvador, because we adopted Bitcoin as a legal currency, and then we realized, wait a minute, this is not really traditional financial instrument. So what we did in El Salvador is we removed all the powers from the central bank and all the powers from the financial superintendents and created a regulatory and supervisory body specifically for digital assets. Now, this innovation has allowed us to catapult as the #1 country in the world supervising and regulating digital assets. In a country as small as El Salvador, with the GDP similar to some First Nations, maybe 3 territorial First Nations, but as a small country, in my office, we oversee over $300 billion of assets under tokenization. We have brought companies that are worth over $100 billion to move to El Salvador because we have clear rules on how this works. A similar example that some of you might be aware of a recent, not a recent, but an opportunity like this, where a First Nation had the foresight to do something, is the gambling licenses by one of the Mohawk communities. Not sure which Mohawk community it is, but a lot of the international licenses for online gambling are supervised in a Mohawk community here in Canada. And the amount of money that they're paying in licensing and supervisory, it's in the millions of dollars. It's the foresight of seeing of an industry that's emerging that requires supervision and regulation. So El Salvador has become, as of today, the leader in digital assets, and we're moving forward to other technologies. We're now, the next step, which some people have spoke a little bit about here, is AI. A leader with a lot of courage has achieved great security, has achieved national pride, a thriving economy, and a lot of opportunity for the youth. One of the things that the president focuses a lot of time and effort in is the young people. But it's not just about saying that we focus on the young people. Every person in grade school in El Salvador gets a laptop from government. Last week, the president inaugurated 70 new schools, new and upgraded schools for the country. All the resources, all the profits that the country is making are going directly into investments for the young people, creating tools. When it comes to AI, we're one of the only countries that have agreements with Twitter. They have Grok XI. We have, my medical service in El Salvador is AI driven. If I were to feel sick right now, I wouldn't venture going out to the doctor here and waiting 3 hours. I pull out my phone and I have Dr. SV, which is the Salvadorian AI doctor application. I can pull it up from here right now, have a live video doctor fill in my information of what I feel bad with, and if I was in El Salvador, immediately would send me an address to go get test if I need a test, and to go get medicine if I needed medicine. Because we have integrated AI not just in the educational process, we're also integrating that into improving the quality of life of the average Salvadorian. So, one of the advantages we had is we're a small country. I do find a lot of similarities with what we were able to do with El Salvador. I think we have a hurricane or something. Maybe an umbrella. The great similarities is that El Salvador was a small country. We all had big issues. We all had murder capital of the world, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to come up to this comparison is that I think that the conditions that El Salvador had to start off with are as bad, or perhaps even worse, than a lot of the First Nations. So you can't lose hope. There is a potential, even for the communities in the greatest adversity, to be able to create something like what we've done in El Salvador. I was also asked to speak a little bit about blockchain and what blockchain is. And blockchain is the technology that is going to be powering literally everything in the future. And this is why I said that speaking of blockchain today is like talking about the internet back in the day. Today, I mean, all of us have cell phones, otherwise you wouldn't hear the Amber Alert or whatever it is that went off. And we depend on the cell phone. And not just that, I guarantee that 90% of you have had this experience of, where's my cell phone? You know, and we live with our cell phones now. We're dependent of the cell phone. But it's not the cell phone that you're dependent on. It is the services that the cell phone provides. And those services come via internet. Very soon, the blockchain technology is going to be in the background of every one of those services. And why is this? It's because blockchain is specifically what the financial industry was missing. What blockchain technology does, or what it is a book of accounts. So think of a book of accounts, but each page, it's linked to another page. So that means that every single transaction that has been inputted into this book of accounts goes back to the original transaction. Now, why is this important? Think of voting. In elections, you have one specific ID, and that specific ID belongs to one specific vote. And there's no way to fake elections, like the mail-in ballots scandal that they talk about in the States. And it's immutable, and you can audit it, and you can trace it. So for example, once a transaction is made, you know the time, you know the date, you know the origin. So if you need to audit it, you can audit it. Land registry. Think of land registry. I mean, when I retired, I moved to Nicaragua. I started buying a lot of land. I bought a little private island, farms, etc. Every year, I had to pay a lawyer over $3,000 to go out and check that no one had stolen my land, because they were paid. Like people down there would fake a registry and sell illegally the land, and then they would pay the registry illegally to register other people's land. So every year I had to pay a lawyer to make sure that no one has stolen my land. But if you had something based on blockchain, this would never happen because it's immutable. It means that every single transaction has a starting point, the transfer. It can't be cheated. It can't be cheated. And the most important part, and what we're specializing in El Salvador, is the financial transactions. You know, I heard people earlier talk about capital markets, investments, and all this stuff. It sounds fancy words that, you know, scares most of us. But the reality is this: there's no transparency in the financial industry nowadays. If you guys go online or you talk to your broker, let's say that today you were to buy a Tesla stock. What gives you the assurity that that Tesla stock is actually a stock that's registered through the Tesla company in the exchange? You're believing the person that you're buying it from that has access to a custodial, but you gotta remember that these stocks are available to everyone around the world. So you don't know if they were supplying, if they're selling more than the supply exists. And this is the biggest issue with the financial industry. As of today, we had, some of you that follow the markets know that silver went through the roof and gold is going through the roof. A lot of the reason for that is because they have sold more paper, silver, and gold than there actually exists in the world. Because no one's come to reclaim their gold so they keep selling gold certificates, but you don't have the gold physically. And because there is no way to ensure that that exists, that it's one-to-one transaction, again, the centralized financial sector has corrupted and taken money from the population. By introducing blockchain, you eliminate all of this. Through blockchain, you ensure that 1 gram of gold, it creates 1 token equivalent to the gram of gold of the supervision. And it cannot be oversold. It cannot be sold in paper to fabricate gold that didn't exist. Sounds a bit complex, but trust me when I tell you that the world is waking up and starting to introduce blockchain into the financial industry. And I know this sounds a bit complicated, but it is a great opportunity for the young people in First Nations to start getting educated in blockchain technology and artificial intelligence. I'll close with that. Thank you very much.